This book is called Around America to Win the Vote: Two Suffragists, a Kitten, and 10,000 Miles. This presentation is for nonprofit educational purposes only. This book was written by Mara Rockliff and illustrated by Hadley Hooper. This story happens more than 100 years ago, when most women in America could not vote, so only men could decide who would make the laws and who would be president. Two women went on a journey across America to try to convince people that women should get to vote too. Here are some words you'll hear in the story. Daffodils are yellow flowers. Goldenrod is a plant with yellow flowers, and it can grow and fill a whole field. A typewriter is an old-fashioned way to print words. You roll a paper in it and hit the round keys to print letters. These are old-time sewing machines that were used to make clothes. A picture postcard had a picture on one side and on the other side room for a short message and the address of the person you would send it to. A cause is something you believe in enough that you will work to make it happen. The ladies in this story believe in the cause of women getting the right to vote. On April 6, 1916, a little yellow car set out from New York City. It carried tools, spare parts, a teeny-tiny typewriter, an itsy-bitsy sewing machine, one strong leather trunk bursting with useful things, two smiling women, and a wee black kitten with a yellow ribbon tied around its neck. The taller woman was Nell Richardson. The smaller one was Alice Burke. Together, they planned to drive all the way around America. It was a great big country, but they had a great big cause. "Votes for women," Alice told reporters. "Votes for women," Nell agreed. They said the typewriter and the sewing machine were all part of their plan. If anyone said women didn't have the brains to vote, then Nell would write a poem right then and there on the typewriter and prove that they did. If anyone said they should cook and sew and leave the running of the nation to the men, then Nell would whip an apron up while Alice gave a speech to prove that they could do both. If the two of them could drive 10,000 miles around the United States, facing danger and adventure all alone, with just each other and a kitten in their little yellow car, then that would prove that women could do anything. So off they went. That very day they had their first adventure, when a horse pulling a wagon down a narrow road refused to let them pass. "Votes for women," Alice told the horse. Nell tied a Votes for Women yellow daffodil behind his ear, and the horse stepped aside and let the yellow car go on its way. In Philadelphia, they stood up on their seats to speak to the great city crowd. Nell didn't need to write a poem on her typewriter or sew an apron on her sewing machine. Men and women cheered. But the next morning, blizzard! Nell and Alice dug into their trunk of useful things. They put on their raincoats and their rubber hats and drove through howling wind and swirling snow to Baltimore. They arrived in time to be the guests of honor at a very fancy party. The trunk held a few things that were useful for parties, too. The next day, when they stopped for gas, a crowd of men clustered around the little yellow car. Alice hopped up on the seat to give her speech, but no one listened, so she told them about the car instead. "Votes for women," the men said, and waved as Nell and Alice drove away. After Washington, D.C., they came upon the bumpiest and muddiest road yet. The little yellow car went bump and squelch and finally got stuck. As the car sank, Nell and Alice jumped into the icy stream. They cranked and cranked the engine, but it wouldn't start. "Votes for women," Nell reminded Alice cheeringly. Alice grumbled, "and good roads." In the trunk they found a lantern and a blanket and a box of candy from their friends. They huddled, wet and shivering, under the blanket and ate the candy until the sun came up and 2 strong mules appeared to pull their car out of the mud. In Virginia, Nell and Alice passed a school, and all the children ran to see the little yellow car. They hung all over it and wouldn't let the women or the kitten go until Alice promised to send them a picture postcard from someplace extremely far away. They drove into North Carolina, passing fields of singing birds and butterflies and goldenrod. They nearly fell into a hole where a bridge used to be. Next came deep puddles, sticky clay, and thick, wet sand. In South Carolina, a whole town turned out and treated them to an all-yellow lunch. In Georgia, they joined a circus parade. In Alabama, the 2 travelers sipped tea and nibbled on stuffed dates. Everywhere they met crowds. Everywhere, Nell and Alice told them, "Votes for women." Outside Gulfport, Mississippi, the little yellow car finally found a mud puddle it couldn't cross. So they sneaked the kitten onto the train. They rode the train to New Orleans and stayed in a fine hotel and waited until their little yellow car could be towed and brought to them. In Texas, they drove through a terrible dust storm and had to wear scarves over their faces. They drove on through the desert of New Mexico. And got lost for days in Arizona, till finally they reached California, where they won a medal at the fair for driving a long way to get there, all the way across America. But they were only halfway to the finish line. They still had lots of miles and lots of adventures on the road ahead. The blue line shows where they went west to California, and the dotted red line shows how they went back to where they started in New York City. On September 30th, 1916, a little yellow car drove into New York City. It carried mud and dust and signatures and souvenirs from all around America, 2 smiling and sunburned women, and a full-grown cat. They arrived to a grand welcome. And a great big yellow cake. The cat ate 7 slices. After 10,000 bumpy, muddy, unmapped miles, Nell was ready for a rest. And Alice? She turned right around and crossed the country all over again. This time she took the train.